Welcome to FootballGameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Bring you our 2014 preseason All-American team for the FBS. We're going to take a look at the offense as well as the defense as well as some special teamers. So let's start off with our first team All-Americans, starting with the quarterback position.
The reigning Heisman Trophy winner Jameis Winston leads off our preseason All-American squad. The 6'5", 235-pound gunslinger displayed tremendous anticipation and leadership skills en route to throwing for over 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, and completing 66% of his passes, leading the Noles to a national championship. Todd Gurley out of Georgia has been a stud from day one. He fought through injuries last season but still came close to going over 1,000 yards last year and scored 16 touchdowns, and he's still one of the best backs in the country who blossomed as a receiver out of the backfield. The slashing Amir Abdullah out of Nebraska ran for nearly 1,700 yards last season at 6 yards a carry, and with the Huskers having some questions at the quarterback position this year, look for Abdullah to flirt with 2,000 yards and be in the thick of the Heisman Trophy race. There aren't enough adjectives to describe Tyler Lockett out of Kansas State and what he did last season for the Wildcats, but I will say his 1,200 yards receiving, 11 touchdowns, and 26.5 yards per kickoff return was nothing short of sensational. Antoine Goodley averaged 18.9 yards a catch last season for the Baylor Bears, and his chemistry with quarterback Bryce Perry is evident, and his run after the catch skill should allow him to exceed last year's impressive numbers. Although he'll play more of a wide receiver role this year for the Wolverines, Devin Funchess, in my opinion, is a talented football player that's a tight end in the mold of the Jacksonville Jaguars tight end, Mercedes Lewis. Cedric Abou is the next in line of very good Aggie offensive tackles who, like Joker and Matthews before him, can play either tackle spot equally as effective. A.J. Cann has been as good as advertised for South Carolina. He's been a day one starter and the most consistent player up front for the Gamecocks, and he dominates on both ends of offense. Reese Dismukes is a two-time All-American out of Auburn and the catalyst to making that entire offense go. He is one of the quickest offensive linemen in the nation. Laken Tomlinson dominated on the interior last year for the resurgent Duke Blue Devils. Pass protection is his forte, but shows tremendous ability climbing to the second level in the running game. Cameron Irving was a player to watch entering the 2013 season. It turned out a very productive year at left tackle for him, earning himself first-team All-ACC honors and is one of the top tackle prospects in the country. I have TJ Yeldon as my first-team all-purpose player because he's a guy that doesn't need much to get going offensively, and quietly he rushed for over 1,200 yards last year at 6 yards a carry and 14 touchdowns, and has soft hands coming out of the backfield, which are rarely used at Alabama. And if he keeps up this pace the way he's going as a junior and then as a senior, if he stays, he'll be the all-time leading rusher in program history. Now let's take a look at our second-team preseason All-Americans. Quarterback Braxton Miller is a multifaceted weapon for the Ohio State Buckeyes, scoring 36 total touchdowns last year while rushing for over 1,000 yards. And speaking of rushing yards, Bowling Green's tailback Travis Green ran for nearly 1,600 yards last season at 5.7 yards a carry. Definitely burst onto the scene and earned himself a spot on our list. Tyler Boyd is the next in line as another outstanding wide receiver from the University of Pittsburgh. Boyd led the Panthers in receiving last year as a true freshman. And Eric Lefeld out of Cincinnati is a supremely athletic offensive tackle and another player that should garner a lot of postseason accolades. Now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball and start with Nebraska defensive end Randy Gregory, who was a first-team All-Big Ten performer after registering 10.5 sacks and 18 quarterback hurries, and the sky's the limit for the 6'6", 245-pound junior. Staying in the Big Ten, Iowa defensive tackle Carl Davis's impact may not show up on the stat sheet, but the 6'5", 315-pound senior makes his presence felt by his ability to collapse a pocket while also being a stout force versus the run. Leonard Williams plays the 5 technique in USC's 3-4 defense, but showcases versatility to play anywhere along that defensive line. Williams was second on the team in tackles with 74, but first on the squad in sacks with 6. Michigan State's Shelly Calhoun is always around the football. He plays with great length and explosiveness, and his 2013 performance for the Spartans earned him Big Ten Defensive Lineman Player of the Year and All-American honors. You can call him a defensive end or an outside linebacker, but wherever he lines up, Clemson's Vic Beasley will find his way to the quarterback. Last year, Beasley registered 13 sacks and 10 TFLs and led the team in both categories. Denzel Perry out of Miami is your classic Mike backer that's a thumper in the middle but also very instinctive on both ends of defense. Perry was the leader of the Hurricanes defense with 108 tackles in 2013. As a true freshman last year, Myles Jack was a do-everything player for the UCLA Bruins. He played running back for UCLA, scoring 7 touchdowns, but also excelled equally as a linebacker, especially in the passing game with 11 pass breakups and 2 interceptions. Lorenzo Doss out of Tulane was a freshman All-American back in 2012. Last year was a second-team All-American, and the 5'11", 175-pound junior enters this season with 11 career interceptions. Vernon Hargreaves was one of the most polished high school cornerbacks I've seen in a while and definitely lived up to the billing as a true freshman in the SEC. Hargreaves became the Gators' top cornerback, finishing the season with 11 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. Landon Collins out of Alabama is the best combo safety in the country. He took advantage of more playing time last year for the Crimson Tide and over the course of the season became one of their most impactful players on both ends of defense. One of the few bright spots for the Virginia Cavaliers last season was the play of safety Anthony Harris, who was the quintessential ball hawk last year, racking up 8 interceptions, which led the nation. Now let's take a look at our second-team defensive All-Americans, and there are some great players here like Ohio State's Joey Bosa, who has superstar written all over him. Last year as a true freshman, Bosa had 7.5 sacks and 6 quarterback hurries. Temple's Tyler Matekovich led the nation in solo tackles with 106 and lived in the opponent's backfield with 10.5 tackles for loss. Kendall Fuller out of Virginia Tech was another freshman of influence as he became an integral part to the Hokies' defensive success, leading the team in interceptions with 6 and was the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year. Taking a look at our first-team special team All-Americans, Andy Phillips out of Utah was sensational last season for the Utes, going 17 out of 20 on his field goals, but was clutch from 40+, going 9 out of 11 with a long of 51. Although some games you rarely saw Aggie punter Drew Kaiser, when he was out there, he was amazing. Kaiser averaged nearly 40 yards a punt with great hang time, downing 17 inside the 20. Stanford's Ty Montgomery is a big play waiting to happen no matter how, when, or where he touched the football. Last year as a kickoff returner, Montgomery averaged a whopping 30 yards a return and scored 2 touchdowns. As a freshman, North Carolina's Ryan Switzer tied an NCAA record with 5 punt returns for touchdowns, and he also racked up 500 yards of return yardage as well as averaging 20.9 yards a return. Here's the second-team All-American squad for our special teams unit. Another impact freshman was Florida State's Kermit Whitfield, whose sprinter speed allowed him to average an incredible 36.5 yards a return and score 2 touchdowns, going 100 yards in a national championship game versus Auburn. Obviously, we're going to need some head coaches for this preseason All-American squad, and the head coach is Michigan State's Mark D'Antonio, whose Spartan teams are always well-prepared and disciplined, and defensively over his tenure, they've been very tough at every level to move the football against. D'Antonio, in my opinion, is the best head coach in college football right now. Gus Malzahn is the offensive coordinator because of his ability to take any personnel at any school he's been and made them both dynamic as well as successful. Charlie Strong gets the nod as defensive coordinator because at every stop, Florida as well as Louisville, his defenses play fast, they hit hard, and they rank amongst the best in the country. Expect Texas to do the same this year under his leadership. And finally, recruiting is the lifeline of any collegiate program, and LSU's running back coach Frank Wilson is the best recruiter in the country. And the reason why LSU has maintained a level of consistency and success while also churning out top 75 NFL type talent is because Wilson has a unique ability of getting players to not only commit and sign to LSU, but also stay committed throughout the course of their time there.